Michigan and Penn State square off in what should be an absolute battle, and there's a lot going on off the field for one of these teams, and there's a lot to prove on the field for the other. Michigan Wolverines are one of the best teams in college football, depending on your opinion, could be the best. And there's a lot to like about this team. Even with the off-field stuff going, there's not much that really is going against them. They have so much talent. They're playing really well on both sides of the football, and it's been a really fun team to watch. Ultimately, they have their two biggest tests remaining, and they will get a chance to prove why they are going to be in the college football playoff. And when you look at this team, they've been absolutely dominant. Now, obviously, the question is who have they played? And right now, the answer is not really anybody. There hasn't really been anyone that's tested them. There hasn't been anybody that's put up really much of a fight. And that's been a concern for their resume. That's been a concern about are they actually a legitimate team or are they just beating up on bad teams? Now, the defense to that is you ultimately just have to play who's on your schedule. You can't control if teams are going to be good or not. You can't control who's on your schedule. You have to play the schedule that you're given. And right now, Michigan is doing exactly what we'd expect a team with this kind of schedule. They are absolutely dominating teams. They're putting up explosive numbers on offense. Their defense is not allowing hardly any yards or any points. And that's exactly what you expect. This is your first real test against a Penn State and Indiana Lions team that is looking to bounce back after they lost to Ohio State in disappointing fashion. I think that the offense has a lot to prove for this Penn State team. And I think going against a Michigan team that has plenty of talent on the defensive side of the ball will test them. The passing attack for Penn State has to take a step forward, in my opinion. When you look at the defense you're facing, this is a front seven that will give plenty of problems to any offense. This Penn State team so far has been, I think, underwhelming for the most part offensively. The offensive line isn't what we expected it to be. Drew Aller is as advertised, but I think that there's still some learning that needs to be done. He also needs someone to step up as his explosive playmaking wide receiver one. I think that they're still lacking a true number one option, and that could be a problem going against a team with a lot of talent. When you're going against a cornerback like Will Johnson, you need someone to step up. You need someone to be a big time playmaker and to go to battle with them. But right now, I don't know if Penn State has that option. That is definitely something to keep an eye on. I think that that will determine a lot of this game because if Penn State can't throw the football, it doesn't matter what they're going to do running because Michigan is going to key in on the rushing attack. They're going to make Drew Aller try to beat them with his arm. And right now, we haven't seen them do that against a good defense. Against Ohio State, they didn't really do anything until late in the game, until the game was essentially over. So if they can find a way to bounce back and show that they are a balanced offense, because honestly, you're doing a disservice to Aller, but you're also not allowing Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen to do exactly what they're brought in to do, which is run the football and make explosive plays. They're two big time playmakers that can break off a big run at any moment, but you need a passing attack to balance out that offense. When it comes down to it, Michigan is going to face Penn State and Ohio State, which we knew were going to determine the ultimately the result of this game or these two games and who would win the Big Ten East. And you get a lot of exciting matchups. We talked about certain players that will need to step up, but the offensive line versus Michigan's defensive line is probably the biggest one I'm going to be watching. Because, like I said, Penn State's offensive line came into the season with a lot of hype. There was a lot of talent returning, including a guy like Ola Fashano, but I think that they've disappointed so far. And this is a great opportunity to showcase that you're still a legitimate unit. You are still a legitimate group that can make an impact, that can create explosive plays and protect your quarterback. Again, the wide receivers obviously play a role in that too, but you're looking at an offensive line that could take a step forward and switch the momentum in Penn State's favor. Now, obviously, the off-field issues with the sign stealing thing with Michigan, I don't know what's going on with that. Honestly, when you look at it, I don't really know what the big deal about it is. I understand the basics of it, but I don't really I haven't heard anything so far that really makes me think that something needs to happen for this year. And I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. What I do know is that you have two defenses that are two of the best in college football. And when you look at the amount of talent they have on those sides of the ball, there are a number of players that will play on Sundays. There are a number of players that are really good college players that are playing with those guys. And you could go through every single player and get really excited. We already mentioned Will Johnson from Michigan. Penn State has a good corner too in Kalen King. I think he's really fun to watch, and he's someone that can lock down a guy like Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson. They're going to be battling, that's for sure. And I think Michigan's passing attack has a lot to prove too. Yes, you bid up on bad competition, but now what can you do? Now you're facing a good defense because Penn State has a lot of talent. They have a ton of talent up front. They have a ton of talent on the backside of the defense. That's going to be a battle. And the passing attack for both teams plays is kind of an X factor for those. Linebacker loaded. Junior Colson and Abdul Carter, two of the better linebackers in college football. I don't think that we talk about them enough because of the teams they play on. It feels like they're just kind of you're almost kind of used to it, so it's just kind of it's standard, and that doesn't create a ton of excitement a lot. But these are two guys. If you go back and watch film, you'll be pleasantly surprised as how good they play, and they'll have their hands full. Both teams like to run the football, so they're going to be busy. The defensive lines are going to be busy. The offensive lines are going to be busy. That will be really fun to watch, if you ask me. These quarterbacks, though, have something to prove. I think JJ McCarthy still gets doubted because he hasn't played anybody yet. He hasn't beaten anyone worth noting. And a lot of times he hasn't gotten the opportunity to play a full game. But I think now is ultimately your first opportunity to showcase you are a legitimate player and you are a legitimate contributor. Because one of the things we've talked about with JJ McCarthy coming into this year was what can he do in big games? Because last year there were some struggles in big games, and he wasn't the player that they needed him to be. This is your opportunity to showcase that. Now, yes, he's put up some big numbers against bad teams, but you can't put too much weight into that because that doesn't really tell you how he'll face a team like Georgia in the college football playoff, a team like Penn State right now. And right now, Michigan is the better team for sure, even if JJ McCarthy doesn't play his best game. But I think that he still has plenty to prove. And when you're picking this game, I don't really know how you can't pick against Michigan. The only way that I think that Michigan gets in trouble is if the turnover battle doesn't go their way. If JJ McCarthy's not careful with the football, if the offense can't find a passing attack, because that's how good Penn State's defense is, that's where Michigan gets into trouble. And this is a big game. I don't expect this to be a blowout. And if it is, then we know that this Michigan team is legitimate. And I think that there is some belief that that might happen. And when you look at what they've done so far, it's easy to see why, because we've watched the games. We know what Penn State's done. We know what Ohio State's done. And neither of those teams have looked overly impressive or on the level of Michigan. So that's why you pick Michigan in this game. But there are things that Penn State can do to ultimately switch the momentum into their favor. It's just going to take a full team effort. It's going to take a almost perfect game from Penn State. But if they can do that, then upset is possible. But for now, it feels like Michigan's just going to keep rolling.